Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just did a little bit of breakdown of the schedules in the Power 4, gave you some winners and losers from every single conference. But now let's get into some Wednesday what ifs. And let's talk about week 1 a little bit. Let's get into some of the big time what ifs and how they will affect the rest of the season. And the one I want to start with is, what if there's a Notre Dame Marshall type game this year? What if there's a game that totally changes the way that we look at the college football season and totally changes the way we look at one specific team? That is for sure. There is a couple other games in this week 1 that I think could fit that bill and could kind of shake up a conference, shake up the entire college football schedule this upcoming year. And there are plenty of really good candidates, but I want to focus on 3 right here. And let's start with South Dakota State heading to Oklahoma State. They are heading to Stillwater in the first weekend. Oklahoma State's the better team. They have the better athletes. They are stronger. They are faster. They have a lot of things going in their direction. They have the best player on the field in Ollie Gordon, but the Jackrabbits can really play some football. They are a team that absolutely is going to cause problems and someone that absolutely can walk into really any stadium and not be afraid because they're national champions. I understand that it's the FCS compared to the FBS, but this is still a team that really knows how to play football and a team that has a lot of experience on its side. So I think it's going to be one of those games that Oklahoma State should likely win. They should be able to pull away and kind of impose their will, but overall, this is going to be a fight. There's no two ways about that, and I think it's going to be one of those that we look up in the fourth quarter, in the late third quarter, and it's much closer than we expected. So that one is definitely one that I'm watching fairly closely. Colorado State heading to Texas is another one that I'm watching fairly closely. I think this is a very interesting one because there are a couple of things that Colorado State does that fits right into what Texas doesn't do very well, and that is getting to the quarterback and playing back-end defense. If those things are not fixed this upcoming year, Colorado State's going to throw the ball around a lot, and Torrey Horton and Braden Fowler Nicolosi are going to be really hard to deal with for this defense. So this is one of those games that I don't necessarily think it's going to be a problem for Texas. I do think they'll be able to get to the passer and be able to play good enough back-end defense. But overall, this is one that if those problems are not fixed in Austin, they could absolutely have a run for their money in week 1 and totally torpedo what could be an incredible season for the Longhorns. And then another one I'm watching a little bit different, on a different scale than the first two, but Ohio heads to Syracuse in the first week. And I think this one's really interesting for a number of reasons. They are absolutely a team that can make some noise, and Syracuse is moving a lot of things around. There's no two ways about that. Ohio did lose their quarterback, Curtis Rourke, as well, but overall, this is a team that has a lot of guys returning into a team that has a lot of question marks going into the season. So this one necessarily wouldn't turn the entire college football world on its head by any means, but definitely would be a very, very interesting one to watch. And that doesn't even include North Dakota heading to Iowa State, North Dakota State heading to Colorado, which some people are actually picking to be an upset. So there are a number of ones in week 1 that can absolutely make some noise and rock the entire college football world. But we will absolutely unpack them if they do happen, and part of me is kind of hoping one at least does. But what if Clemson knocks off UGA is the other question I have here, and this might be the biggest one in the week 1 slate. When you talk about what Clemson would have to do to go into Atlanta and knock off the Bulldogs, we would be having a real conversation as Clemson not only rolling through the ACC this year, but being a team that can win a national title, because you're walking onto a field with a Georgia team that I think is the best in the country. I think they have so many things that are just absolutely elite in a million different ways, and they absolutely will have plenty to say about this upcoming year. And if Clemson can roll in there and beat them, it means Cade Klubnik is rolling this offense the way that he should. It means this defense, especially on the back end, is better than I expect it to be. It means that Dabo Swinney has got these guys ready to roll, and they are absolutely going into the season with as much energy, as much hope and belief as they possibly can be. And that would get everyone really excited in Clemson, South Carolina, because it could be a 2018 type year. You could be able to tap into what you had back then and possibly play that really good defense and have a couple of difference makers on the outside and really make some noise this year. So overall, I think this is one of those things that I don't think Georgia's going to lose. I do think Georgia's going to win this game, but there's definitely some things here that Clemson could exploit. There's definitely some back-end issues, possibly the interior, that maybe they're able to run the ball with Phil Maffa. Maybe they're able to get some play-action plays down the field and kind of expose some of these back-end problems for UGA. So this is not necessarily out of the realm of possibility. It's something that I'm not necessarily betting on, but if they walk into Atlanta and knock off that Georgia Bulldogs team, then we're talking about Clemson as definitely a team that can totally win the entire national title. And if they do that, then a lot of people are going to have to delete a lot of tweets about Dabo Swinney. I can promise you that. Notre Dame and A&M is one of the interesting games in week one. And my big time question is, what is if this one is decided by 14 points or more, regardless of which way it goes? I think it would show a lot about whichever team, wins which one way or the other, and obviously would show a lot about the team that gets blown out. So something like Notre Dame winning by 14, that would mean Riley Leonard is running this offense really efficiently, and he's coming in off an injury and didn't necessarily have the full spring to really get going. So that would be a great sign. That would mean that they haven't necessarily hit their peak yet, and they're still finding ways to be a really, really good football team. I think Marcus Freeman will be going into this year with a ton of energy, and they would be the team that they expect to be, which is a national title contender, a playoff team, someone that is going to create problems for these teams like A&M. So overall, I think this is one that if you were to pick a team to win by 14, I'd probably lean towards Notre Dame, but I don't necessarily think that's going to happen one way or the other. That's why the line is -1 towards A&M right now. So I do think this is going to be a really interesting game. But on the other side of things, you have an A&M team that has a lot of new things. Mike Elko coming in, Connor Wegman, you don't really know what you have in him quite yet, although I think he's going to be a really good player. If you come out and beat a Notre Dame team that everyone expects to be a national title contender by 14 points or more, everyone's going to be talking about you as the SEC team to beat. I can almost promise you that. They're going to be the team that everyone is looking at and saying, they're the dangerous team this year. They are the team that can get to the end of the year, and them and Texas are playing for a spot in the SEC title. Or Texas isn't even, but A&M is. So I definitely think this would be huge for either one of these programs. But overall, I think it's going to be a battle. I think I'd be very, very surprised if it was decided by more than 7 or 10 points, if I'm being totally honest. But I do think it's one of those that if a team walks in there and into Kyle Field, regardless of it's A&M or Notre Dame, particularly if it's Notre Dame, but regardless of who wins, if they win by 14 points or more, we're talking about them as a national title contender. There's no two ways about that. And an A&M team that absolutely has a ton going into this year that could really make some noise right out of the gate and get some really big eyes that they haven't had really at all throughout the offseason. But this is a huge week one matchup, frankly, my favorite of the bunch, and I think it's going to be a real tough battle. But if it's a blowout, we're having some very interesting conversations at the end of the day. And then I want to talk about Western Kentucky heading to Tuscaloosa, because could Western Kentucky cause some problems for that back end? And if they do, what are we talking about on Monday morning when we talk about Bama? Because WKU is going to throw the ball. That's who they are, whether it's Caden Veltkamp, TJ Finley, or a wide receiver playing quarterback. They're going to throw the ball. That's what they do. That's the way they go about business. And Bama's back end is not necessarily the strongest thing in the world. Neither is their pass rush right this second. And none of this is to say they're going to get torched by Western Kentucky, but it is to say if they, let up a couple of big plays, if that freshman group with, Zabian Brown and Jalen Mbakwe, if they don't look quite as solid as you think they're going to look, you're going to have a problem because you don't necessarily have this grand runway to figure out all of the issues on the back end. You play USF in the second week. That is not necessarily going to be as pass heavy of a team, but caused problems last year. They could absolutely cause problems this year. Then you go up to Wisconsin in week 3. They are going to throw the ball, especially with Tyler Van Dyke. I feel like they feel more confident in throwing the ball in that offense. Running is where they'll, butter their bread, but at the end of the day, they are going to spread the ball out. And then you have UGA in week 4. So it's not like Bama has all this time to figure out that back end problem. They have tons of teams that are going to come in and throw the ball at them. And especially if they see Western Kentucky throw for 250, 300 yards through the air, they're going to have some questions, and they're going to attack those questions. So this is a game that Bama needs to send a message. They need to show that they are, miles ahead of where people think they are. The back end looks really solid. Devontae Smith is the guy that I'm watching most closely at that star position that is going to be huge for this team's success. But overall, I think when you look at this back end, it doesn't necessarily make you feel overly confident. They got a guy coming in, or they got a team coming in week 1 that is ready to cause problems at that area. So it's one of those that could define the way that everyone attacks Bama going forward. They could go straight at their throat and say, you can't guard the pass, then we're going to pass at you. And regardless of if you have guys like Malachi Moore on the back end or Keon Saab, it's not going to matter because the corners can't necessarily play as tight as they need to, and you have plenty of other problems structurally. So I think this is one of those things that it won't necessarily be the end-all be-all by any means. I still expect them to win regardless of what Western Kentucky does through the air, but I think when you talk about the way that other teams will attack them, a lot could be decided in week 1 and definitely cause some problems for Bama down the road. But overall, there's a ton of questions in week 1. We might just get back to this next week if I'm being totally honest, but that will do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have really incredible people doing just great work across every sport you could possibly want. So anything you need in the world of sports, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.